The wind whispered across the dust plains as Lieutenant Mara Voss stepped out of the airlock, her boots sinking slightly into the red Martian soil. The stars above were crisp and wild, unruly point of light far removed from the soft glow seen from Earth. Out here, the universe felt closer and more indifferent. Behind her, the module's external lights flickered on, casting pale illumination across the rocky outcrop where they'd landed. The team had expected a routine resupply check on Colony A-17, but from orbit, something had been off. No signals, no power grid, no heat signatures. They had landed anyway. Orders. She glanced back. Harlan emerged next, adjusting the strap of his scanning unit. His eyes were already darting across the landscape, calculating risk. Mara trusted him, not just because he was a skilled engineer, but because he didn't believe in ghosts. She, on the other hand, wasn't so sure anymore. The silence of Colony A-17 was a silence that didn't feel empty. It felt deliberate. They advanced toward the habitat dome, the cracked dust groaning softly beneath them. The entrance hatch had been sealed from the inside. Harlan ran diagnostics, but Mara's gaze fixed on the dome surface. It wasn't just dust-covered. It had been burned, scoured in erratic, spiraling patterns that reminded her of magnetic storms. Or writing. She couldn't decide which would be worse. Inside, they found remnants of life, a meal half-eaten, a tablet displaying data logs that ended mid-sentence, and overturned chairs as though everyone had risen at once and simply never returned. No blood, no signs of a fight, just abandonment, a planned, silent disappearance. Harlan pulled up the logs. Last transmission was 11 days ago. Routine mineral scan. They mentioned an anomaly, deep resonance below the surface. Then nothing. She nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. Same anomaly that tripped our sensors during descent. He hesitated. You thinking seismic instability? I'm thinking they found something. And someone or something didn't want them to. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. Not because of the cold or the faint hum of the power core cycling beside the lander, but because of the dreams. Not hers, those she expected, but Harlan's muttering in his sleep. Words she didn't understand. Rhythmic, repetitive, like a chant. When she tried to wake him, he didn't respond, his eyes open but unseeing. The next morning, he didn't remember a thing. By the third day, the rest of the crew had arrived. For more, scientists, navigators, ones and a linguist. They reviewed the site, dismissed the patterns on the dome as static erosion, chalked the missing colonists up to a catastrophic systems failure followed by evacuation. They theorized, wrote it off, but Mara noticed the others began waking with markings on their wrists and forearms, like bruises shaped into spirals. They laughed it off. Dream pressure, straps too tight, circulation. She didn't laugh. By the seventh day, the dreams had spread. The linguist, Dr. Keiji, began documenting the shared phrases being muttered across the crew. Singularity avoids the echo, the watchers in the dark, refraction of mind. He wasn't afraid. He was fascinated. Mara was not. She activated the long-range transmitter manually. If protocol had insisted on a 2-week report delay, she would have sent the warning sooner. Mission compromised. Unknown anomaly active. Recommend isolation protocols and planetary no-fly zone. Repeat, Colony A-17 is not safe. The signal flickered. She waited. The reply was brief. Signal blocked. Rerouting failed. Human presence unauthorized. It hadn't come from Earth. The crew refused to believe her. The logs, they said, had been corrupted. There was no external message. No interference. She was overworked, stressed, paranoid, but she saw the way they watched her, quietly, almost in sync, like a murmuration of birds pretending to be still. She confronted Harlan. You know something's wrong. He hesitated. For too long. Finally, he said, They told me last night, not in words, but in resonance. With the anomaly, Mara, not them. Who? His eyes shone, alien with calm. The ones who erase the others. The ones who guard the pathways between stars. The galaxy doesn't want us to leave. It's not avoiding us. It's warning us. She took a step back, heart pounding. You're not him anymore. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. Or maybe I'm just closer to understanding than you. That night, the stars shifted. Not literally. Celestial bodies didn't change positions like that. But something in the sky bent. The streak of the Milky Way shimmered like heat distortion. For the first time, Mara saw motion where there should be none. Shapes flickering at the edge of comprehension. Watching. The crew didn't seem to notice. She packed her gear. One of the scout ships still had reserve power. As she entered the cockpit, she paused. A handprint. Hers, on the glass from the day they landed. But now beside it, another, larger, not human, and yet not hostile, merely present. She took off, breaking through the thin atmosphere, pushing against a gravity that suddenly felt heavier than usual. The stars pulsed around her. Navigation controls flickered. Systems stuttered, then stabilized. Mars shrank behind her, and then the silence came. No signal, no ping, no orientation, no Earth, only stars, only them, and the faint echo of a message forming not in her ears, but in her bones. You were not ready, but now you are seen. Mara closed her eyes, alone, drifting, the first human to truly understand why the galaxy had been silent for so long. Not out of fear, out of choice. The silence had never been empty. It had been waiting, watching. And now she had answered. The stars didn't blink. They stared. From the observation deck of the Isabel Reyes, Earth's most advanced deep-range reconnaissance vessel, Mara Voss stood alone, watching the cosmos turn. The silence of space was different out here. Dense, deliberate. Every now and then, she swore she could feel it pressing in against the hull. Not as vacuum, but as judgment. Weeks had passed since she'd left Mars, since the colony, since the message that hadn't come from Earth. She hadn't gone back. Couldn't. Whatever had reached out to her, there hadn't released her. It had merely given her space to drift, to be tested. Behind her, Commander Arden Malik entered quietly. His steps were even, authoritative. He was military through and through, an anchor in the abyss. Yet even he was visibly unnerved by Mara's presence, and not because of rank or respect. It was the way she looked at the stars now, like she was waiting for them to speak again. You haven't logged a sleep cycle in 3 days, he said. Mara's reflection flickered in the glass. Her eyes were sharp, restless. The ship doesn't sleep. Why should I? Malik didn't answer right away. You requested this mission. Out past Pluto. You told the council you had coordinates. But those coordinates point to empty space. Not empty. She turned. A corridor. A fold. Malik crossed his arms. We're not here to chase ghosts, Lieutenant. They're not ghosts, she said. They're watchers. They're thresholds. Thresholds to what? She hesitated. Then, to something older than memory. The ship shuddered. Only slightly, but enough to raise alarms on the secondary bridge. Malik's calm lit up immediately, but Mara was already moving. She had felt it, not turbulence, not propulsion, but a shift, as though the fabric of space had momentarily twisted. When they reached the bridge, the science officer, Enzo Rahim, looked pale. We've got a distortion, he said. Sensors are showing gravitational lensing in a localized field dead ahead. Is there an object? Malik asked. Nothing solid, but the distortion is symmetrical, almost engineered. Mara leaned over the console, ignoring the sudden chill that crept along her arms. They're opening again. Malik's patience was thinning. Lieutenant, explain now. Who are they? She looked at him, and her voice dropped. The ones who decide who gets to join the stars. The ones who mark the boundaries. We crossed a line when we touched Mars. They saw us, and now they're watching to see what we'll do next. A silence fell over the bridge, not just of words, but a certainty. Every person there, trained in science, protocol, logic, felt it, that cold recognition of the inexplicable. We're reading resonance, Rahim said. Low frequency, non-random. It's repeating. On audio? Malik asked. Yes. But it's not in any language. Mara pressed a control, and the sound filled the room. A deep, vibrating hum, like the shifting of stone inside a mountain. Beneath it, a rhythmic cadence, like a heartbeat, too slow to be human. "They're speaking," Mara whispered. "It's noise," Malik snapped. She turned on him. "It's invitation." "No," he pointed to the screen. "It's bait." The ship trembled again. Lights flickered. Engines remained stable. But navigation controls fluttered between coordinates that didn't exist. Star maps folded in on themselves, then corrected. They were being scanned, not just the ship, but the people inside it, internally, on a level that no human tech should allow. Rahim looked up. "They're inside our systems. No entry point. They bypassed everything." Malik's jaw tightened. "Shut it down. All comms, all scans. Lock the bridge." But Mara didn't move. "They're not trying to harm us," she said. "They're trying to understand if we're still worth keeping." The room went still. "Keeping?" Rahim asked. She nodded. "In the galaxy. In their silence." Malik stepped forward. "You're asking me to believe we're under some kind of galactic judgment?" "I'm not asking you to believe it," she replied. "I'm telling you that's what this is." The silence wasn't absence. It was a firewall, a quarantine. We've been allowed to grow in a box, untouched, uninvited. But now we've knocked too loudly. Malik stared at her. "And what happens if they decide we're not ready?" Her answer was soft. "Then we don't get another chance to ask." Outside, the distortion stabilized. A ring of darkened light coalesced, space folding inward like the iris of an eye. A passageway. The air on the bridge thickened, as though time had slowed. Every instinct screamed to turn away, to flee. But Mara stepped forward. "This is a test." Malik blocked her path. "You're not taking the ship in there." "I'm not asking for the ship," she said. "Just a pod." "You'll die." "Maybe. But if I'm right, that's not the worst outcome." He looked at her a long time, as though trying to separate the woman he knew from whatever she had become. In the end, he gave the order. One pod, unarmed, launched into the corridor at minimum power to avoid threat. No pursuit unless a signal was sent. Mara entered the pod in silence. As she launched, the stars around the opening shimmered, not with light, but with intention, like something immense was waiting just beyond human sight. She felt the pod slow, though no thrust had changed. Time thinned. Inside her mind a shape formed, not a voice, not a language, a presence. She thought she might scream, but the feeling passed quickly. Instead, she felt a single idea impress upon her, clear and absolute. "You are seen." And then the pod reappeared on the other side of the corridor, floating, alone. The stars looked the same, but they weren't. Different constellations. A distant sun. She wasn't near Earth anymore. Not near anything she recognized. Her controls still worked. The pod systems were intact. But navigation showed no known star maps. It wasn't that she'd traveled light years. It was that she'd stepped outside the known altogether. She stared into the dark. And the dark, this time, blinked. The darkness was not silent. In the black expanse, where stars burned too dim to be cataloged, and where no known map could offer orientation, Mara floated. Her pod glided without propulsion, drawn forward by forces that obeyed no physics she recognized. There was no up or down, only motion and the unshakable certainty that she was being escorted, not drifting. Inside the pod, the air felt denser, like it carried weight beyond molecules. Data streams flickered. Meaningless readings of radiation levels, gravitational flux, and fluctuating neutrino patterns. She had stopped trying to interpret the numbers. They weren't for her anymore. Something outside, beyond the composite shell, moved with her. She couldn't see it directly. Each time she turned external cameras toward the shimmer that followed her, the feed dissolved into static. But its presence was undeniable. She felt it in her chest, in her teeth, behind her eyes. Not watching, not hostile, simply aware. Then the pod stopped, not abruptly, but smoothly, like a hand easing into stillness. The movement ceased. Stars remained still. There was a silence that was not empty, as though the vacuum had been hollowed further to create space for something ancient to arrive. A light pulsed in front of her. Not from a beacon, not from a star. It was a geometric form, spiraling, shifting dimensions, not truly three-dimensional yet not flat. A construct made of intention rather than matter. Her breath caught, and then she heard the voice. Not sound. It didn't enter through her ears. It resonated within her, like a memory she didn't recognize but knew had always been buried. You breached the veil again. Why? Mara sat straighter. I didn't come to trespass. I came because I was called. You are human. You call yourselves uninvited. She swallowed. We didn't know there were rules. We thought the stars were ours to explore. A long silence followed, not in seconds, but in thought. You have seen fragments. Mars was not meant for your kind to interpret. You awoke what you could not endure. They were lost, she said. The colonists. Were they destroyed? No. Transferred. Their patterns were unstable. Their minds collapsed upon reception. They were not aligned. Her voice dropped. And me! You were marked. Not chosen, curious. Curiosity is a trait of divergence. That trait is now measured. The light pulsed again. Around it, the stars shifted, forming strange non-Euclidean constellations. She had the sensation of being inside a cathedral made of time and possibility. What are you? She asked. We are not singular. We are guardians of silence. We are what remains between the galaxies and what devours them. A flicker passed across the screen. A visual, Earth small, spinning. Then a second image. Another Earth. Not a twin, but a potential. A path unrealized. This is your divergence. A fort delayed. You're showing me what we could become. What you were meant to become. Before your noise began to breach the quiet. The screen dissolved again. Now, images of ancient civilizations, not human, rising and vanishing, not through war or famine, but through erasure. Whole timelines extinguished. Mara felt a crushing empathy, as if she'd touched their grief. Their stories had never even had the chance to begin. Why us? She whispered. Because your kind multiplies meaninglessly. You reach outward with machines before mastering yourselves. The galaxy does not deny curiosity. It denies recklessness. She leaned forward. Then, test us. Let us prove. You are being tested. You are the test. The light began to retract, folding back into itself. The movement stirred the pod, this time not with force, but with decision. She knew what was coming. You're sending me back. To tell them. To show them. Show them what? That the silence was not avoidance. It was mercy. And then the pod shifted. It didn't move in the way she was used to. There was no trajectory, no time delay. One blink and the stars around her changed again, this time not to the unknown, but to the familiar. So, her sun, blue wavelengths pushing through the dark, pale crescents of known planets rotating through vast arcs. She was home, a crackle. Her comms buzzed to life. Static, then a voice. Pod Alpha 9, this is Isabel Reyes. Repeat, Alpha 9, do you copy? Mara exhaled slowly, the first breath she realized she hadn't taken in minutes. She reached for the transmitter, voice trembling. This is Lieutenant Voss. I'm here. I made it through. The line went quiet for a moment. Then came a stunned reply. We lost your signal for 14 days. You were gone, Mara. She glanced at the chronometer. For her, only hours had passed. I have information, she said. I need to speak to command. Affirmative. We're bringing you in. But as the pod adjusted course toward the mother vessel, Mara looked again at the stars. She no longer saw them as a map. They were no longer destinations. They were thresholds. And somewhere beyond them, a presence watched still, not with menace, but with a profound weariness of guardian force, yet again, to consider a question no species had yet answered correctly. Are you ready to belong? The pod docked, and Mara, the sole witness of the moment the galaxy blinked, prepared to carry the question back to a world not yet prepared to ask it. The return was not a triumph. Mara stepped onto the Isabel Reyes to a reception, neither celebratory nor cold. It was clinical. Eyes avoided hers just a fraction too long. Hushed voices stopped when she entered a room. She had been retrieved from nothingness, reinserted into the system, and now the ship didn't know what to do with her. Decontamination, neural scans, physical analysis. She submitted to all of it without resistance. She was healthy, unchanged, at least on the surface. But something in her eyes had altered, and they knew it. The debrief was led by Admiral Renata Solari, linked remotely from Lunar Command. Her image flickered in the air before Mara, flanked by two men from Psychological Assessment. The questioning began gently. Where had she gone? What had she seen? How had she returned? Mara answered precisely. No speculation. No poetry. Only what she had witnessed, what she had heard. The Guardians of Silence. The test. The corridor between stars. The vanished colonists. The warning. When she was finished, there was a pause. You understand what you're claiming, Solari said slowly. Yes, Mara replied. You're stating that an intelligence, not organic, not machine, has deliberately isolated humanity from galactic contact. Yes. And now they've acknowledged us? Through you. Not acknowledged, she corrected. They've noticed. That's different. The silence on the channel stretched. One of the analysts, Dr. Ghali, leaned forward. Lieutenant, are you aware that no physical data supports your account? Your pod recorded minimal energy spikes, but nothing beyond high cosmic radiation variance. No starfield anomalies. No displacement data. I know what I experienced, Mara said. Yes, Ghali replied, his tone tightening. But are you aware that experience and evidence are not synonymous? She looked at him, unblinking. Are you afraid of what I saw? Or are you afraid it's true? That ended the session. They confined her to quarters after that. Not prison, not officially, but restriction under observation. She understood. She wasn't angry. They had every right to be cautious. She had returned with words, not proof, and words were dangerous, especially true ones. Days passed. She ate, slept, waited. The stars outside the viewport remained as they had always been, silent, beautiful, unknowable. But she knew now that the silence wasn't passive. It was held. Then, on the seventh day, Malik visited. He stood in her doorway longer than necessary, as if weighing whether to speak. I read the transcripts, he said. All of it. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching him with the calm of someone who had long since shed the need to be believed. And I believe you. She smiled faintly. That's not a comfort, Commander. It's a burden. He entered, the door hissing shut behind him. I checked the log from the Martian, anomaly again. The crew, before they vanished, they recorded signals at 27 hertz. You mentioned that frequency in your report. Mara nodded. The resonance of the corridor. Malik lowered his voice. There's more. Since your return, we've been picking up echoes of that same signal, weak, spread across deep space, from systems we haven't reached. It's growing stronger. They're watching, Mara said. He leaned forward. You think it's another test? She shook her head. No, it's the same test. Ongoing. I was just the first to know we're in it. Malik sat back, his face unreadable. What do we do with that? With knowledge that the galaxy may be judging our entire species without our consent. We stop thinking we have consent, she said quietly, and we start acting like we're not alone. Later that night, the signal changed. Not louder, not closer, just clearer. The rhythmic hum that had once felt like noise now pulsed with structure, patterns, intervals. It wasn't language in the traditional sense. It was measurement, behavior, reaction. They weren't talking to Mara anymore. They were listening. And someone else was trying to answer. The crew of the Isabel Reyes assembled on the bridge. The signal was now detectable across multiple bands, radio, gamma, even gravitational waves. Earth was aware. Lunar Command had begun rerouting observational satellites. Other ships were being redirected to the edge of the system. Something was happening. Mara watched from the observation ring as the galaxy began to stir. not with the chaos of discovery, but with the quiet momentum of inevitability. This was never about her. It was about the threshold she had crossed. The final message came without preamble. It didn't arrive through standard transmission. It didn't even manifest through equipment. It bloomed in the minds of every sentient human on the Isabel Rhea simultaneously. A single phrase, carved not in language, but in certainty. "You've been heard." And then the signal vanished, gone as if it had never been. Mara exhaled slowly. The silence had returned, but it was not the same. Now it waited with purpose. And she understood the weight of what had been given. Not an invitation. Not yet. A warning. A question. And a second chance.